In almost every sport, when a player is described as being overweight, husky, or just straight up being called fat, unless it's about alignment in football, it's almost always used in a derogatory way.
Mr. Jabba the Hutt, you fat, slovenly, no good, lazy. Oh, come on.
But in baseball, not only does it arguably make someone a better player, but a lot of the time, it endears that player to the fans in a way that even the best players just can't match. But why? Why does a Bartolo Colon home run, a Pablo Sandoval diving play at third, a David Ortiz hustle triple, or any big guy hitting a ball into orbit get us baseball fans just so jacked up? And I just want to say now that anytime we call someone fat, it is strictly complimentary. And while I didn't grow up being overweight or anything like that, I was always very underweight and not strong enough to play baseball to the level that I wanted to, so everybody in this video does have a lot of admiration from me. Anyway, when Aaron Judge hits a ball so far the camera doesn't even catch where it landed, it rules. But look at him. He's the platonic ideal of what the best power hitter in the game should look like. But when Prince Fielder does the exact same thing, something in our brains and our hearts activates that stays dormant when Judge does it. And there's actually science to back this up. The expectancy violation theory was coined by this person, and basically states that when someone you know defies your expectations, whether it's positive or negative, it has a higher emotional response. So when Shohei Ohtani goes yard, we expect it. And while it's still really cool, it doesn't have the same level of sauce as a La Tortuga home run. But novelty like that can only last so long. As we'll talk about later, a lot of overweight players are all-stars, superstars, Hall of Famers even. For those guys, incredible feats become the expectation, but we still can't help but get pumped. Why is that? Well, it's a known phenomenon that we as humans favor those that we personally identify with. If you played shortstop in high school, it's natural for you to develop a special affinity for your team's shortstop. If you needed knee surgery from a fluke accident in your past, you may get especially pumped when a guy wins an MVP after tearing the ACL because it gives you hope that if he can do it, so can you. I think you know where I'm going with this. So let's say you, well, not specifically you, but you know, someone who watches baseball every day and has done the 999 challenge more than once and has more meat on his bones than he used to, tunes into a baseball game and sees a pitcher pushing 300 pounds absolutely dominate. It's only natural that a small part of his brain will think, maybe I can do that too. Sports are at their most emotionally resonant when they capture your imagination. When you're a kid, it's awe-inspiring to see the best humanity has to offer performing feats of strength, precision, and skill. And while watching Albert Pujols, you think to yourself, ooh, one day I'm gonna be just like him. Then 15 years pass. That little boy is now a little man, but somehow a big boy at the same time. You look at Albert Pujols now riding out his twilight on the Angels and you think, oh, I'm just like him now. But then something changes. Pujols has a career resurgence. He reaches 700 home runs looking like this. If Albert can do it, why can't you? Why are there so many fat baseball players not only remembered for their sex appeal, but for being legitimately great players? Well, CC Sabathia had this to say.
What did you weigh whenever you were throwing baseballs?
I was an offensive tackle, bro. I was 330.
Did you feel like you had to be that big to throw?
I did. The one year, I think it was like 2013, I got down to like 265. I was feeling good. Came to spring training, I was throwing like 83. I got back to 290 before spring training was over.
Yeah.
Mass equals gas, you know what I'm saying?
Hell
like,
yeah.
I need a big ass to throw hard.
If someone is bigger, they're gonna be stronger. They're gonna throw harder. They're gonna hit the ball harder and farther. But that does come at the cost of defense, base running, and stamina. Well, it usually does. Josh Naylor's 30 stolen bases in 2025 spits in the face of that idea. In 1973, the American League introduced the designated hitter as a way to get pitchers out of the batter's box and increase overall offense. While this did work, eventually getting worked into the National League as well, something that started happening was more big, slow dudes that couldn't reliably play in the field getting a second life to their career. But it's not like there weren't slow fat guys in baseball before that. In fact, if you ask a non-baseball fan to think of somebody that fits that criteria to this day, they'll probably still say Babe Ruth. A lot of players I've mentioned up to this point had a lot of their appeal come from being fat, but that doesn't really seem to be the case with Babe Ruth. He was the best player in baseball, the most popular player in baseball. He changed the game in ways that we hadn't seen before or since. And he even redefined what a celebrity can be in the 20th century. And he just so happened to be a round, pudgy guy who really liked hot dogs and beer. And it doesn't help that the majority of the high-quality footage we have of him is from later in his career. But Ruth showed that a guy that looks like him can be the most dominant professional athlete in his sport, which to this day stands as an inspiration to beer-drinking, hot-dog-loving baseball fans. Since then, every generation has had their big bopper, their hefty lefty, their round mound of pound. At this point of the video, I'm going to go through a handful of rotund baseball players from Babe Ruth's time to the modern day. Jumbo Brown was a teammate of Ruth's, a relief pitcher in a day when starting pitchers regularly threw complete games. To be honest, he's mostly a forgotten player, except for the fact that his name is Jumbo Brown. And he was huge. He was 6'4", 295 pounds. He had to be quite the imposing presence on the mound, in spite of his career .407 ERA. Fat Freddie Fitzsimmons, as he was called. You know what? I gotta see what this guy looked like real quick. Really? He was considered fat? He was listed at 5'11" and 185 pounds. Okay. Well, Fat Freddie was an above-average pitcher for nearly 20 years from the 20s to the 40s, and a trend we'll see is pitchers with more girth is having their best seasons into their late 30s and 40s. Fitzsimmons may have been the originator of that archetype, having an ERA in the 2s and 3s from age 36 to 39. Joining the Not Fat with a Fat nickname club, we got John Fats D'Antonio. He has the same listed height and weight as Ozzie Albies. He was a catcher who only played 50 games during World War II, but again, Fats D'Antonio looked like this, and he weighed the same as Corbin Carroll. Gates Brown is another player with a weight on the scale that might turn heads, but just by looking at him, you wouldn't exactly call him fat. But the incident he's most known for is a definitive fat guy moment, and we'll let him tell the story.
This particular game, me and Norm Cash wasn't playing this day, and me and him was sitting on the end of the bench. Sent the bad boy up to get us a couple of hot dogs and watching the game. All of a sudden, he stopped the game and said, Gates, get your bat and go hit for Orler or whoever. I turned my back on him. I had 2 hot dogs, and I stuck them in my shirt. Out of all the time, I didn't care if I'd strike out or pop up or something. I hit one up the slot right center, and I had to go in the second head first. You can imagine that white uniform. I had ketchup and mustard and all over me, you know.
For what I can tell, the first truly fat baseball player to really ascend to fan favorite level after Ruth is John Kruk. Like Ruth, he didn't start his career too big, but with every passing year, he got bigger and rounder and fatter. But that's not the only thing that made the baseball world love him so much. On top of having the tummy of a champion, Kruk had a mullet that could only be rivaled by Mr. Turner from Boy Meets World, and an incredibly entertaining personality. Something that continues to be showcased through his work as a broadcaster.
Well, I mean, if you come to a game and you don't come home with stuff all over your pants, I mean, what did you even go?
Around the same time, Cecil Fielder burst onto the scene, having a season where he led the league in home runs, RBIs, and also strikeouts. Perhaps a sign of things to come. Maybe it was seeing these guys do it at a high level with the high BMI. Maybe it was the fact that everyone around this time was getting heavier, but there started to be a lot more fat baseball players, not only making the majors, but flourishing in the majors. Tony Gwynn debuted for the Padres in 1982, listed at 185 pounds. And over his 20-year career, he slowly grew into his body, all the while never losing his elite contact skills. And after his rookie year, never having a season in the majors with an average under 300. And playing in the outfield in a DH-less National League. On the pitching side, one of my favorite fat pitchers of his era was Rich Garces. He was a reliever that had some decent years on the Red Sox, but the reason I love him so much is his nickname, El Guapo, which translates to the handsome one. So before we had Big Sexy, we had El Guapo, and I wouldn't want a pitcher known as El Guapo to look any different. Mike Fetters is cut from the same cloth as El Guapo in a lot of ways. He didn't have a nickname on the same level, and for the majority of his 16-year career, he was serviceable to actually kind of bad, but he still struck fear in the hearts of his opponents. Let me show you how. The most notable fat starting pitcher of his time, though, has to be David Wells, who got into battles with multiple teams to lose weight, battles that he eventually won, and the results speak for themselves, having the best years of his career in his mid to late 30s, looking like this. So 90s baseball. Big guys that can hit home runs, throw hard, and I hope you know where this is heading, steroids. Like Kruk and Gwynn, and honestly countless other major leaguers who played into their late 30s, guys started getting a lot bigger and stronger, but in the case of someone like Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, guys who I would classify as unethical big boys, definitely grew in size in the 90s. And some of it definitely can be chalked up to age like everyone else, but when that much mass is muscle, something has to be going on. And yeah, something was going on. Another player linked to steroids around this time was Mo Vaughn. With Mo Vaughn, he admitted to using steroids in a less egregious way than the players mentioned before, but the jury is still out on the true extent of his usage. Regardless of that, he is absolutely one of the first players to be named when thinking of fat guys hitting moonshots. When he won MVP in Boston, he was already pretty big, but his time with the Angels and the Mets are what really puts him into the all-time fat guy conversation. In one of his seasons in Anaheim, he hit 36 home runs, and he also had the 5th most strikeouts in a single season at the time. Two more interesting case studies in the class of fat guys using steroids are David Ortiz and Bartolo Colon, and I'm going to tell you why they're so interesting to me, but first, let's go into their background a little. David Ortiz was a promising but still developing power hitter in Minnesota, but once he got to Boston, he blossomed into a superstar, and may have been the biggest reason they ended their 86-year championship drought. But a year before that, he allegedly tested positive for banned substances during a confidential drug test. That information got leaked in 2009, and Ortiz denied knowingly taking any performance-enhancing drugs. It should also be noted that he would be officially tested by Major League Baseball, and he was never suspended for any failed drug test. Bartolo Colon, however, did, and there was no denying it. Not even he could deny it. He's another thumbnail-level fat baseball player that not only was a really good player, not only won a Cy Young while looking like this, and not only played well into his 40s, but he did it all while being one of the most popular and loved players, despite having a relatively recent run-in with PED police. Why is that? Why in a time when the reputation of guys like Ryan Braun and Alex Rodriguez were ruined, is Bartolo Colon still revered by baseball fans? Well, my immediate thought was, well, maybe it's because he's fat. We talked about all the reasons why a fat athlete might get a favorable public perception, so yeah, he cheated, but look at him. How can you hate that face? And going back to Big Papi, why is he still one of the most celebrated players in baseball with a spot in the Hall of Fame, despite having a link to steroids, however tenuous it may be? Gary Sheffield had similar ties to steroids around the same time, and that was a major reason why he didn't make the Hall of Fame himself. Why does Ortiz get elected on his first ballot and Sheffield never gets in at all? Well, again, look at Sheffield, and then look at Ortiz. Okay, you have no idea how much I wanted the conclusion of this point to be that players can get away with much more just because they're fat. However, through more research, especially research into these two players, I don't think that's true. For one, personality goes a long way. Even going back to a guy like John Kruk or even Babe Ruth, they were just as memorable for how they acted as they were how they looked. David Ortiz was always great at walking the line between a guy having fun playing a kid's game and just the right level of competitiveness and drive. Not to mention, he pretty much always stayed in the good graces of the media, unlike someone like Gary Sheffield. And when those same media figures are the ones voting people into the Hall of Fame, it's got a part to play. Bartolo Colon, on the other hand, got busted for PEDs in 2012 for 50 games. Personally, when I think about how players responded to PED suspensions, they either appeal it, or they try to reduce it, or eliminate it, or sometimes they even claim they had no idea they had illegal substances in their system at all. Colon, on the other hand, took full responsibility and immediately served the full suspension. In an era with guys like Ryan Braun trying to ruin the reputation of a sample collector and Alex Rodriguez lying on 60 Minutes, Colon took the exact opposite route. The actions and attitudes of Colon and Ortiz in particular have to be mentioned when explaining why they remain so beloved despite their run-ins with controversy. They're also really easy to root for because they're fat. I can't pretend like that doesn't play a factor. Come on. The 21st century has really been a golden age of productive fat baseball players on both sides of the ball. When talking about hitters, you got Prince Fielder, who might have the most satisfying home run swing of all time. Also, going back to Bartolo Colon, he played in the majors for so long he was teammates with Cecil Fielder and played long enough to play his son Prince, and even last longer than him, though that was for reasons outside of Prince's control. You got Pablo Sandoval, the Kung Fu Panda, who during his best years on the Giants was actually an above-average defender at third base, on top of hitting moonshots into McCovey Cove. Then you've got guys like Dmitri Young, a guy who you would look at and assume, maybe he hits in the low 200s, but has home run seasons in the 30s and 40s. But he was actually the exact opposite, with a career batting average just under 300, and averaging only 13 home runs per season. You got Rowdy Tellez, who got into a scary collision during a bang-bang play at first. Well, scary for the runner. Rowdy ate that like a midday snack. You got Williams Astudillo, who was poised to be the heir to the big sexy crown, became the Twins' go-to position player pitcher, certainly had his moments, but ultimately wasn't very good. Incredible vibes, though, from him. You got Daniel Vogelbach, the true heir to the big sexy crown, spending time with the Mets and all. The one-time All-Star, that's right, Danny Burgers is an All-Star, is what you would imagine a circle would look like if it learned how to hit a baseball 500 feet. And every time he ran the bases, it was an art. On the pitching side, you got CC Sabathia, the Hall of Fame pitcher who has 3 career home runs, and he only had 17 starts for a National League team. You got Heath Bell, who has the same throwing motion as my uncle, also the same height and weight as my uncle, but my uncle never did sprint from the bullpen and slid into the mound at an All-Star game. You got Bobby Jenks, who was called into games by his manager doing this, and that's all he had to do. The bullpen knew, the team knew, and the fans knew it was time for Bobby Jenks to pitch. You got Ray King, aka the Burger King. He held unethical big boy Barry Bonds to just 1 hit in 17 head-to-head matchups. Unfortunately, his 1 hit was quite the whopper. You got Jabba Chamberlain, and first of all, what a nickname. But he is famous for getting swarmed with bugs in a playoff game leading to the Yankees losing. But again, his nickname's Jabba. We can't not mention him in a video about fat baseball players. So what did we learn about fat baseball players from all this? I've gotten a bit carried away when it comes to naming all of my favorite fat players, but I think that speaks to the power that these guys hold in our hearts. Sometimes we, as a predominantly male baseball audience, can't help but objectify the people we see. But other times, the characters we sometimes form parasocial relationships with are because of their actions, their personality, and their smile. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos about baseball history, you can click on either of these videos, or if you want to subscribe, you can do that by clicking right there. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.